Before working with Laurie-Ann, I was completely overwhelmed. I knew I wanted to start speaking, but every time I sat down, it was the pitching and the idea generation and where to speak and who to talk to and what to say. And it was too much. So one day I realized I really just needed to get clarity and start with what I wanted to speak about and who I wanted to speak to. And I knew that that would really narrow down the process of pitching and putting myself out there. I hired Laurie-Ann for a consult and wow. I have 3 overarching angles now that I can pitch to different groups depending on their needs and my goals. So it saved me a whole bunch of time and mental anguish, and I don't worry about coming up with hundreds of different ideas for hundreds of different organizations. It's just the 3 main ideas, super clear, super simple, and the best part is I felt like a total rock star who absolutely should be on stages. So if you're thinking about hiring Laurie-Ann, whether for a consult or some ongoing coaching and mentoring, what are you even waiting for? Why are you still listening to this? Just go book a call. Just do it. You'll thank me.
Stories aren't just for kids, Disney, and playtime anymore. No, it is the way that adults remember things, learn better, and connect. And that's what this summer series month of July is all about, is storytelling. So let's dive in to the first episode of this series and understanding why do stories sell. Hey, if this is the first time we're meeting, I'm Laurie-Ann, and I'm the host of this podcast, which is all about how to leverage public speaking as your best form of marketing. If you're a coach, consultant, and you are looking for ways to actually showcase your expertise, being the booked speaker is the fastest way to fill your roster. This is the first episode in this storytelling series. And so I just feel that it's just warranted that, like, why? Why stories? Because we were told stories when we were little, like you're just getting ready to go to bed and it's mom, dad, tell me a nighttime story. Let me finish watching this movie. But there's a reason why stories are the best way to really connect with others, to help remember. I believe that if our teachers actually told more stories, we'd probably remember a lot more of that information. One of my fondest elementary school memories is when we had this particular substitute. Her name was Mrs. Landry. And Mrs. Landry was a phenomenal storyteller. At some point in the afternoon, she would wipe down the chalkboard and she would grab one piece of chalk. And then she would stand in front of us. And she was an older woman. And it was just the way that she would start telling a story. And as she told the story, she would start drawing a scene. So there might be multiple scenes that are in this story, but I remember all of us so fixated on everything she shared. The stories, the pictures. I mean, she just had us as if we were putty in her hands. So that is one of my earliest memories of being in the audience of a true storyteller. Since then, so much research has been done on stories and storytelling and even neuroscience, what parts of the brain it actually lights up. This whole episode, I just want to share with you why tell stories. And as we move along into the other episodes of this series, I'm going to actually talk about how to tell a really good story. So, one of the things that I say about storytelling is like candy for the brain. It literally lights up different areas of your brain, the sensory parts, the emotional parts, motor parts. And I will share all of that geeky neuroscience stuff with you in a moment. But it literally creates mirror neurons where your listener is actually feeling what you felt. When you tell a really good story, your audience can feel it, can sense it. You've probably heard people say, imagine picking up a slice of lemon and you're raising it over your water glass and you're squeezing that slice of lemon. What is happening in your mouth right now? Is it getting a little tingly as if you were putting that lemon, that slice of lemon in your mouth? I know that mine is. I mean, I'm just talking about it. But this is what happens with the brain. The brain is starting to feel that lemon. It knows what that lemon feels like because it's tasted that lemon before in the past. So it's so funny how my mouth is already watering. And why is that? Because the brain is sensing the lemon. The same thing can happen to you when you are either in somebody's audience or when you are telling a story. All right, here's another example for you. Is telling a story when you are introducing yourself. My elevator pitch is literally a story. I could sit there and say, I am a speaking coach for coaches, consultants, and service providers who want to learn how to write and deliver amazing presentations. Like, yada, yada, yada. That's a little boring. But what I do say when I'm asked to introduce myself is, I'm a reformed, painfully shy girl who accidentally said yes to a speaking opportunity. And I wasn't very good, but that very first speech that I gave, I showed up and I served. And people came up to me afterwards and said, do you work with clients? So I share a story to introduce myself because then the person who's listening is imagining what I do. So that is another place that you can be using stories. And I want you to think back to a story that you heard on stage, a story that you heard on a podcast, a story that somebody used to sell you something. I specifically remember being at Bath and Body Works, looking at like these mitts that you put lotion on and you put the mitts on. The salesperson told me a story. She told me a story about how a friend of hers had bought them and yes, she had really dry hands and like she told that's all she did was tell me a story. I was like, sold, I'll take the mittens and the booties. So think back to something that you bought because of a story. Think back to a job interview when the HR person or the potential manager is asking you questions. Are you just answering yes, no with facts and figures? Or are you telling them a story? Stories are a great way to share that popular question of what's one of your weaknesses? Be able to tell a story so that it also highlights, but here's how it benefits me. Here's how others are able to see this as a strength. And here's when it comes in handy is by the power of telling a story. So think back to a time when you were on a sales call and instead of sharing with the potential client all the different ways that you can work with them, and here's all the things that you get for signing on with me as a private client, you tell them a story about a client, their success, the results that your clients typically get. What would happen if you just told a story? What I have noticed in my own sales calls is every time I tell a story, my prospect is leaning in and they are listening because what's happening in their brain is they are seeing themselves in the story. And there is the other benefit of stories is your audience sees themselves in the story. So I want to share with you what happens to the brain because I think that's really critical for this particular storytelling series is to understand and really be able to visualize the different parts of the brain that actually are lighting up. So there's the sensory cortex and motor cortex. And this is the part of the brain that's responsible for touch and movement and texture. And so when you start describing how something felt, what it looked like, or moved, and your audience's brain is going to react as if they're experiencing it themselves. Remember those mirror neurons. But this is also known as neural coupling. So mirror neurons and also neural coupling are actually in action. So think about this. Like I grabbed the microphone. My palms were a little sweaty, or I sat down on the cold rock. You start to like feel it, see it. So that's just one particular spot. That's just one part of your brain. Then you also have the olfactory, and that's a little hard. It's a little tongue-tied to say that, but this is part of that of your brain that is responsible for smell. And smells are a powerful memory trigger. If you start to describe a scent, like a girlfriend of mine is a baker. So you walk into her kitchen and you can smell fresh baked sourdough. Or you walk into a freshly cleaned, disinfectant hospital room. I mean, like the smell of bleach just like hits you like a wave. You know what I'm talking about. Like literally, this part of the brain, the smelling part of the brain, is lighting up. And here's a fun fact about this, like smell actually bypasses the thalamus and connects directly to your amygdala and your hippocampus. I know this is a lot of neuroscience nerding out, which actually controls emotion and memory. So think about this, like going back to like the lemon. Did your body, besides your mouth, like start to like salivate a lot? But did you like maybe like make a funny face? Well, there's some motor neurons that are actually working because of the idea of the smell of a lemon and what it does to us. So this is why smell is also something really important just to think about. You don't have to light up every single part of the brain with every single story, but I just want to give you some ideas so that you understand like what part of the brains are you actually igniting. So, amygdala, here's another section. This is the emotion and the fear part of the brain. So, when you introduce some sort of emotion, suspense, vulnerability, I mean, this is when your amygdala is actually getting involved. I thought if I bombed this talk, my entire business would collapse. When I talk about my very first speaking event, I wasn't good. There was no beginning, there was no ending. There was just this middle part. I had no idea that that very first terrible speech would actually be a pivot in my business. The tension just lights up the amygdala, that emotional alert center, and it keeps your listener engaged. This is where your audience is literally leaning in and sitting on the edge of their seat. Okay, there's another section. The section of the brain that forms memory. This is the hippocampus. And this part of your brain actually helps form and store long-term memories. That's why stories actually anchor in your message in somebody's mind so much longer than after you step off the stage. I walk into conference centers and people ask, "Are you going to tell the jackknife story?" Because I was known for doing that. "Are you going to do that ball exercise?" Like, there's a way to get known for things, and that is having your audience remember you, rave about you, and this is what gets them to refer you. So being able to light up all these different parts of the brain. And this hippocampus, this memory formation, I think is also why people like to watch or listen to stories and movies again and again and again. And you as a speaker who's telling the same story again and again and using the same speech again and again, your hippocampus is working with you to make this a great story, to make this a great speech. Recently I heard Dan Martell talking about a speech that he had just given. And he was very busy. It was one particular day. I was watching one of his videos over on YouTube. He was giving a keynote twice in one day and then, flying back to see his family. Somebody asked him, "How many times have you given this speech?" He said, "This speech, 250 times." 250 times. You know how good you get after you give a speech 250 times? It's memory. Hippocampus is working with you. And think about the people that are in that audience or one of those two audiences. There could have been people in there who'd seen him speak before, heard this very speech before. And that's never, ever a problem. If anything, It's like watching a movie that you've watched again and again. It's like you know what the ending is, and you are still going to find something new. So, this is why storytelling is so brilliant. So much research has been done on this, and I hope that you're going to enjoy this series. But this very first episode of this series had to share with you about the brain. I just wanted to state my case on why I want you to tell more stories. A little bit of science was shared with you today with all my geeking out on neuroscience, and also telling you some of my own stories woven in here with all of this information. So I hope I've whet your appetite for more stories and telling better stories to grab people's attention. So next week, we're going to be talking a little bit more about stories. So until next time, be in demand. Hey, you've been listening and nodding along thinking, I'll start speaking when I feel more ready. But here's the truth. Clarity and confidence, they come from doing. That's why I created In Demand, my monthly membership for people just like you who are ready to grow their business with speaking. Even if you're not sure what to do, where to find opportunities, or what to say once you get that opportunity, you don't need to be perfect. You just need to begin. And we'll make sure that you don't do it alone. Doors are open now, and our next live call is coming up. So if this has been tugging at you, consider this your sign. You can join us at speakandstandout.com/IND for In Demand, and that link is down below. Your audience is waiting, and I promise the moment that you step up, the right people will start paying attention to you.